Welcome and hi. This is Stephen Haylestrom. This is Let's Talk Housing and 92.7 in Peterborough on Trent Radio Community Station. Really appreciate everyone who's been listening, and I do apologize. This is new to me, and I have managed to have missed a couple of my deadlines for project for having my audio in, and that has caused some delay, and therefore you may have heard a program repeated. So again, apologies for that. However, I'm going to try to be back on track and keep all of that up to date and excellently placed and keep going with it. There is a lot to talk about in the housing world, and I'm glad to be here doing it with you. Today we have an interview with another young person, as well as I'm going to talk about one of my favorite housing ideas, and also I'm going to talk about after my interview, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of an experience I had with our national radio people, CBC radio, in trying to get attention to the housing dilemma. Thank you again, and we're just going to move right on to hearing from our young person. Hi, Stephen Haylstrom here. This is Let's Talk Housing, 92.7 in Peterborough on Trent Radio. Today we have an interview with a young person, and I'll let her introduce herself. She's very giggly, so I never know exactly what will happen, but here we go. So if you would like to introduce yourself, go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Chaya. I am a 12th grade student at Thomas A. Stewart Secondary School in Peterborough. Um,
And
I'm Steven's daughter. That's an
ah,
important piece of information. Um, and I plan on going to law school.
there you go. Yes, she's a very ambitious young lady. And today we're going to talk about housing. And I've asked to several times to interview my lovely daughter for this because she's, a student at high school in Peterborough. And I can tell you, when I was in high school, I was really not very concerned about my housing alternatives. Now, for her, she's got, her university coming up, and then after that, home ownership, family, etc.
That's a funny
But
joke.
there you go. Yeah. So what do you think? Like you hear me talking about housing, you hear your friends. What's kind of the vibe out there in the zeitgeist?
Well, um, I go to school in Peterborough, and I think Peterborough is a very good location to use as an example for this because like I mean women in a lot of places don't feel safe like going out at night, but I think it's especially bad there, not for any reason other than the huge issue that Peterborough has with homelessness. Like I I have a very close friend that lives right downtown in Peterborough, and we can't even walk around during the day without being a little bit worried. And it's nothing like against these people. We just Peterborough kind of does nothing to help.
To solve the problem, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and do you think it's Peterborough that should be responsible?
Well, the county, yeah. If you have a lack of homes, who's supposed to deal with it other than the people who can build homes?
Well, do you think the problem is just a lack of homes, or is it the price of homes, or like why are the homeless people? What do you think is the problem? Why do you think there's so many homeless people now?
Well, Canada has, as a whole, has an incredible home shortage. So even if the housing prices weren't crazy right now, am I allowed to swear?
Uh, I mean,
Okay.
to some extent,
Okay.
sure.
Um, Even if the housing prices weren't absolutely crazy, we'd already have an issue with not having enough homes. But I think that it can't just be fixed by making more homes because I mean, the issue in Peterborough especially is a lot deeper than that. Like I think we need more addiction resources and um job resources because I mean, I hear a lot of people in my area or a lot of people like even my age talk about like how these homeless people just need to get their act together and get a job, but especially in a town like the size of Peterborough, there aren't many jobs to be had currently.
So, do you think that, I mean, do your friends talk about like if you get a full-time job working, just a regular job, like working in a factory or even at Tim Hortons or in the uh, retail world, do you think if you have a full-time job there, you could afford a home in Peterborough?
Oh, no. Like not at all. I mean, what do you mean by having a full-time job? Because how many years are you having this full-time job before you can even think about getting a house? Like the housing prices have only recently started to come down a little bit again, but it's like actually astounding to look at. I think about that all the time about like the fact that I will probably never like be able to own a home or not for a very long time. Like you were able to buy a home when you were in your whatever
20s.
20s exactly, and I will never be able to do that.
Well, so the price of housing, and really what I'm getting at is I wonder whether you or your friends have kind of calculated this out, because certainly people are upset about, being there's a lot of homeless people. But even if there were jobs, like how much would you have to make in order to be able to afford? Let's say there were jobs and there were houses. How much do you have to make? Do you think the average job pays enough to be able to pay if you have a house?
um Definitely not. I mean, the poverty line is just like raising exponentially because the price of everything is going up. So now your minimum wage job, even if it's full time, like you can barely make rent every month. Like they keep raising minimum wage like 10 cents or 20 cents or maybe even a dollar, but it's just kind of hilarious that they think that that's going to have any real impact because I mean the thing we really need is like affordable housing, not like we don't need more homes that are just going to be expensive because construction, not construction companies, but firms that build houses tend to try to make the most expensive houses possible that will be sold because then you'll have a higher profit. But if you continue to keep making your houses more and more expensive, then nobody can buy them.
Well, I think that right now that might be exactly what's happening. Why, like you mentioned, the price of housing has gone
Mm-hmm.
down a little bit, right? So what I hear is that the reason that price of the housing has gone down even a little bit is because the housing is now unaffordable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like even in Peterborough, just a regular home,
Oof.
2 bedroom or 3 bedroom house is like 700 or 800, $100,000.
Oh, easily.
Right. And so,
Even out here where it used to be way more affordable, like the houses here are $800,000 maybe. I see like listings every day for like in the millions,
right.
and that's after it's already come down.
And right, or at least leveled off. And
Yeah.
then, so with all of that said, and we go back to the homeless problem, it seems to me that more and more homeless people are homeless not for the same reasons people were homeless, 10 or 20 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if I would like call it like a homeless problem in the same way that other cities have like quote unquote issues, because generally, I mean, I don't like the way it's talked about usually, but I find Peterborough is a little bit better at dealing with the situation, or combating the situation. Like a couple of summers ago, the sharps disposal boxes started popping up everywhere to limit the amount of like needles that were like hanging around. And I find that the issues are, yeah, less with what you would typically think of for homelessness, and often people associate it with like drug abuse, like people are abusing drugs and then lose their homes. But I find in Peterborough, when you talk to the homeless people in Peterborough, it is the opposite. People can't afford their rent. You'll see people who are still working and still look quote on, like, I don't know how to, they still look like they're living in a home, or they still look like they're functioning, but they just can't afford to live in their home anymore.
So yeah, those people end up either couch surfing or living in a car.
Yeah, and then that, if you talk to these people, you realize that that is what led to the addiction. It didn't happen the other way.
Right. Yeah, that's what I've meant too.
That's
Is
why
that
I think affordable housing could be so beneficial in Peterborough, because a lot of the problems started there in the first place. Like, it got so much worse when the housing costs started getting higher.
right, and then people can't afford, so it's kind of like this weird spiral, right, or circle where
Yeah.
you you're working, you're trying to you got the best job you can at that moment. You're making, you're going to work, you're working one job, maybe two jobs, and then you find that your landlord comes and says, well, your rent's going up,
Mm-hmm.
or your cost of food has gone up, and just getting to work, transportation has gone up, your car insurance,
Yeah.
all of those things. So then
Gas. Sorry.
gas, right?
Like,
Yeah,
people
gas.
can't even afford to
Now,
get to work.
right, people forget that it was really only a short time ago that where gas now is $1.60 a liter
It was
around
literally like
here.
70 cents a liter when I was just before I started high school.
Yeah, and
Like,
that was only 6 years ago.
ha 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 ha.
No, it wasn't even 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right. So that's it. It's funny how memories are so short on these things, and realizing that because often kind of in, I don't know, in parts of the public eye, it's that homeless people, if you're homeless, it's because you're drug addicted or have mental illness, or you've been abused, or you are an abuser, or something some something has happened that hasn't that is different than regular people, so therefore you can't survive
Mm-hmm.
and get your rent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. That's, I mean, I've never seen that. I mean, I guess, like I was saying, like the way people are homeless in our area is a lot different than like Vancouver, right? Because they're different places and they have different issues. Um,
Well, I think Vancouver is just like a couple of years ahead of us, meaning that yeah, they have like you said, maybe a bigger drug problem, right? Because they certainly have a pretty big, very big overdose problem.
Yeah, I think the reason it's a lot different is like access to drugs because in Vancouver, since like the problem kind of like snowballed, they were so readily available. So then it did happen in for a lot of people the way everyone assumes it happens, like drugs leading to homelessness. I feel like it happened that way more often out there because of how available drugs were.
Okay, yeah, maybe, and I can't speak to that so much. So, what do you think is what would you, if you've got a magic wand, and actually you do have a magic wand, direct from Harry Potter,
Okay, thank
but
you.
that if you could wave that magic wand, and what would you do? Like, what's a solution in your mind to all of this, or two or three solutions, or 10? What are they?
um I think it I think the most important way to start is it being addressed. Um, like I think it's not talked about enough currently. Like a few years ago, it was a little bit better. Like they were trying to put in effort to get people off the streets, but now recently, I've always been really happy when walking down the streets of Peterborough because compared to cities like Toronto, you really don't see any like anti-homelessness architecture, like those benches with the handles in the middle of them because those are made specifically so that homeless people can't sleep on them. But I think in the last year, as some of the architecture that they put in like not even 5 years ago is starting to deteriorate, I'm definitely like seeing things like this pop up, which I have never seen in Peterborough before because they always knew that we had homeless people in Peterborough and they knew that it was important to, at least if you're not going to do anything to help these people, make it a little bit more comfortable for them to be like like living like you know a little bit more comfortable to be homeless. But um I think the awareness is just like slipping away. So I think the important things we can look at right now are talk like discussing it more readily. I think definitely specific to Peterborough, um affordable housing units will like really benefit the situation there, which I know I've heard lots about recently. There are a few projects that are popping up like currently. I know a lot of people that are getting their volunteer hours by helping the affordable housing units go up, um, which I think is an amazing opportunity. And if you are a high school student and you need volunteer hours, I really recommend that. There are a couple projects going on where you can volunteer your time. Um, and then the more volunteers they can get, the more affordable these spaces are going to be. And I think we need addiction rehabilitation centers. I think like safe injection centers and um, federally funded rehab centers are really things that could benefit Peterborough because as much as the people of Peterborough really want to think that they're forward thinking about this, a lot of them do have the not in my backyard mentality and they don't love the idea of these things existing within the city. But I think it's the next step to actually helping, you know?
Right. Yeah. And so finding housing, and who do you think should pay for that then? Government?
Well, whose fault was it that the prices are so unaffordable that people have to leave their homes. Like, I don't know. I don't think anybody else should be paying for it.
Well, if the government pays for it, we're all paying for it. So I
I
think
know it's coming from tax dollars,
yeah.
but
So it's a societal issue that needs to be dealt with by the government rather than by industry or something, or by people together. The way,
I
you know,
think industries should. I think industry should want to
participate in some way.
participate. I think housing firms should be donating money because they've spent the last 15 years absolutely jacking up the prices of their houses so they can make more money, and it's time for them to give some of that back because they
Or have it taken back.
or have it taken back, exactly,
Yeah.
because they've been making obscene amounts of money while people have been losing their homes.
Well, they're taking advantage, it seems, right? Like
Oh
they,
yeah.
yeah, that especially during COVID, there was the way things changed. Everybody became frightened. There were houses continued to sell. In fact, in many respects, it accelerated, but it became quite different, and the pricing and everything of things started to go up, and they continue because there was this kind of false dichotomy that everything was more expensive. It was harder to get things, which, some things were harder to get. But as it turned out, it wasn't as hard as what it was made out to be. And then that increased the price. And then once somebody gets a price increase, they don't want to give it up, right? Like they don't want to give it up once
Yeah, it's
they.
difficult for them to want to go back down. But
Right.
I mean, it's what needs to happen. It's like the state of the world right now. I mean, Canada specifically, with the whatever the hell is going on with inflation currently, and the Bank of Canada is just I I don't know. I can't even I don't even like to think about it because then it just makes me think about the fact that, like, even if I get a job making six figures, I will not be able to afford a house for the next like 30 years.
Well, you'll be able to afford a little garage.
Yeah, I can maybe rent if I'm lucky, one bedroom apartment. It's kind of horrifying to think about. So they either also I think this goes along with the projects I mentioned before. They are also putting in a lot of effort to try to employ currently homeless people in these affordable housing projects so that they're making money and they will have
Tell me
homes that
about
they
that.
can
I
afford.
didn't hear about that in
Um,
Peterborough.
yeah.
So how is that happening? Tell me.
Um, they're doing a couple affordable housing projects currently, and that's I was talking about. I know a couple people that are getting their volunteer hours um by helping to build on these sites or prepare the sites, and they're also, if you go to the I forget what it's called. It's like the homelessness resource center or something in Peterborough. They also can like support you in finding jobs
Well,
on the
yeah,
sites.
there are certainly ways to help that are out there, and they're ever increasing, and
Uh-huh.
to help people. But so, pardon me, but interestingly, they have this concept in housing called right now that's called that there is a lack of housing for the missing middle. They call it, and what that's referring to is, I think, the people that we're kind of talking about, right? It's kind of the people that are in the middle. Like if you've got two house, people in the house, and they're all making six-figure plus salaries, then
Mhm.
they're going to be able to find a home and support themselves.
Mhm.
But it's the people who are working at not even just minimum wage jobs, but the ones that are,
Yeah. I
like even
mean,
if you're making 25 or even $30 an hour, it
a lot of people making that amount are still on the
yeah,
poverty line now.
yeah.
because it's like ever raising. Like people are making $50,000-$60,000 a year. Like we know someone very close to us who's making she makes like $80,000 a year now and still can barely barely afford an apartment.
Is
Which
that
is,
someone we know lives in Toronto?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a bit of a separate issue, but that's just a crazy thing to talk about. Like even when you're making that much, it's not enough for an apartment. But anyway, yeah, when I mean people out here, you're making $60,000 and you're still on the poverty line now. It used to be like it was
Wow,
30.
that was
It
a
was
great. That
what?
was great. It was great money making
Yeah,
$60,000 a year.
$30,000 even
Yeah.
a couple years ago wasn't even on the poverty line, and now you're doubling that, and you still can't afford it. And so I think a lot of people feel very like trapped in their jobs because they are seemingly making more money and they're getting raises, and then the world is just every time they take a step forward, we just take two
Yeah.
steps back as a
Price of food
country.
goes up, or the
The price
price
of
of
food
gas
goes
goes
up
up,
and
or
the
the
price of gas goes up and your rent gets raised, and then you're actually making less money than you were before.
landlord, rent evicts you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about that? Have you heard that from any of your friends at school about maybe them even personally experiencing that with their families where they are renting? Because lots of people rent as well as own.
Mm-hmm.
Where their parents are renting somewhere and the price has gone up an unexpected amount of money.
Mm-hmm. And it's forced eviction. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
I
you've
I
actually
know I
heard
know
people.
lots of people who that has happened to, like families that are renting houses and then the rent gets raised by like four
Double.
thousand dollars a month,
Yeah.
or it's doubled, or and and you have no control over that. I mean, in some places they have it like watched a little bit more. Like you can only raise it this much every month, this much every year. But I know plenty of people who've experienced that.
Well, you know what that is. What landlords do is if there's a rent control on the particular uh, unit that they're
Mm.
renting out, then what they can do is that rent control only stays in place if they if for the person who's in there. So once that person leaves, then they can start rent at a higher amount.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're paying $1,000 a month for a place, if they kick you out and it's vacant for a month, they can start the new person at $2,000 a month, even though they wouldn't have been allowed to raise your rent
Mm-hmm.
from 1,000
Yeah.
to 2,000. So there's lots of kind of sneaky ways. But did you ever answer my question about what you would do if you could wave a magic wand
Oops.
and you're just waving your magic wand around the and make things different? What would you do? Just
Yeah, I
make
did.
housing there? Yeah.
No, I was talking about addiction centers and affordable housing.
Okay.
That's how we
Okay.
started talking
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Okay. So, solution: wave your magic wand. More housing, more help for people with addictions, more opportunity for housing, better control on the price of housing, maybe by the government, and less taking advantage on the part of people building housing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
there are really big issues within housing firms, especially recently. Like some seriously fucked up stuff is going on with housing firms, and you can definitely research it. But
Yeah.
it's
Where
true
do
they
you? Yeah.
purposefully make houses look expensive with the cheapest materials so that they can sell them for more money. But the only reason housing prices are plateauing is because it's gotten to a point where they can't sell these houses anymore. They have to start bringing the prices back down. because nobody can afford to buy the houses anymore.
So they've reached their limit.
Yeah.
And now this isn't things you've heard me talking about. These are things that you hear at school, or is it a combination of both? Or
Well, I mean,
you do hear it from me?
no, I have access to the internet, and
okay.
I
That
can
internet
hear
thing.
about things on my own.
Okay. And okay. And you mentioned that you were going to go to school to be a lawyer. So what would you do? Here's a legal question for you. What would you do if you were a lawyer, and I know you want to be a defense attorney, right? So
Yeah.
you've got somebody.
They're not called that in Canada.
Sorry. What are they called?
Criminal defense lawyers.
Okay.
We don't have like attorneys.
Sorry. Okay. Pardon me. Poor language on my part. So if you had someone who was accused, or they had gotten in trouble because they refused to leave their home because they were trying to be evicted by their landlord, how do you think you would handle it? Like, what kind of things would you say to defend that person against their landlord, to being evicted? Is there anything you can think of?
Well, I mean, that's very scenario specific. Like, I read about a case recently where a mother had been asking for they had a black mold problem in their apartment, and they had been asking their landlord to fix it, and they had been like telling their landlord to come help them because she had a small child who then later ended up developing asthma due to that, but she stopped paying her rent because he wasn't coming to fix it. And that type of case is very easy to argue on the side of the person who is renting the home, because it's like a lack of care on the landlord's part.
Negligence.
So it's negligence. So if there's a clear reason, like, you can't really argue on someone's behalf because they couldn't afford rent, because technically speaking, if the rent hasn't been raised recently, it's not the landlord's fault. But if there's been consistent rent increases, like month after month, or if the landlord is trying to pull anything illegal, obviously you can argue it. I just think it's very scenario specific, so it's kind of a difficult question.
Yeah, okay. No, I just thought I'd ask. Okay, any final things you'd like to add to this?
No.
No, that's it?
I think you kept me up past my bedtime.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I can't do that. But I do want to give you an opportunity, because this will be on the air in Peterborough next week. So maybe we could just step aside from the talking about housing to talk about what's happening in Peterborough at the beginning of December that people might be interested in who might be listening to this. So there's something happening at your high school.
I was gonna say, what's happening? Yeah, I am in the arts program at Thomas A. Stewart in Peterborough. TAS, yes.
On Armour Road.
Okay, you don't need to dox me. But we're putting on a pretty sick production of Mean Girls. It starts on the 7th. There are 4 shows. It ends on the 9th. And you should come. It's really good. There are posters all over Peterborough. If you see a neon pink poster, it's probably for our show. There's a QR code on them that you can scan. You should come. It's not super expensive, and it's really good.
And are you singing and dancing in this?
Nope, I am on the costume, hair, and makeup team. Yay!
Oh, and do you have a title there? On the hair and makeup team?
Costume, hair, and makeup team.
Okay. That's fine. Great. And what date? Tell me again what date it is and the name of
It's
the play.
oh, I think they know. It's on the 7th, 8th, and 9th. I think there are
Of
4
7th,
shows.
8th, and 9th of
December
2023.
2023.
Yes.
Um, it's called Mean Girls, like that one movie with Lindsay Lohan.
Oh,
Uh huh.
what's the idea? What's the story behind? But this
I'm
is a
not
musical
giving a
production.
synopsis of Mean Girls. It's
Why?
about
People might be
a
interested in
girl
that.
who's mean.
Oh, really?
Yep,
I wouldn't have guessed that.
I know. I actually made him watch Mean Girls, and he did not love it.
Oh, I
So,
did so. It
uh
was
huh.
great.
Okay.
It's the best movie I've ever seen in my life. Well, thank you very much, young lady.
Ooh.
Um, and I appreciate your time. And you really show your concern for people who are disadvantaged. And thank you. And I really appreciate your time. And sorry to keep you up beyond your bedtime. And
It's.
have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was no problem.
Okay, bye for now. Hi, and thank you, Shayora, for participating in our event this week. Really was, and really was appreciated. So, I wanted to take a moment first off to talk a little bit about Remembrance Day, just passed this past weekend. And one of the things that comes up for me is a number of projects that have been happening to provide housing for veterans. And in particular, they have these tiny home communities. And I really think that it's an interesting concept, but it's one that isn't only viable for veterans, but it's also viable for a variety of different groups or communities that would like to be able to work together in a situation where they can, be housed in some sort of community. And the idea of using tiny homes to accomplish this is really quite a viable solution. It can be done for community groups, everything from single mothers to students to veterans to any particular type of group that would like to be designated or no designation and just create a community. Tiny home, and in particular, I mean, I'm not crazy about the word tiny home, but I can live with it. Basically, I'm talking about a dwelling unit that might be 400 square feet or less, either a studio apartment or a one bedroom, and could even be 500 square feet, but they're individual units that are confined, that are situated around each other to create an interesting type of community. I talked a little bit about it in the last program around the idea of some special type of architecture. You can listen to it on there. And then it really has an opportunity to create some very interesting environment. Student housing, it's a great way to do student housing. It's a great way to do new immigrant housing, great way to provide housing inexpensive and quickly, because these type of units can be built quite quickly, and they can actually be built in a way that uh, involves the actual community that will be taking advantage. And that actually brings me to my next thing and the last point, really the last thing for discussion for this week. And it's really my encounter I had with CBC radio last week, in particular, Ontario Morning CBC radio program. Now, the challenge really was that I was listening, taking my daughter, taking her to the uh, bus, school bus in the morning. I was listening, and they were talking about, they were telling a story about the federal government, and during COVID, the federal government had invested. What they did was there was a company in Quebec
that that was starting or wanted to be in the pharmaceutical business, and specifically had some ideas, concepts on developing a vaccine for COVID 19. This was during the pandemic. So the federal government agreed. This company developed a business plan. They developed a plan for making the vaccine, and they presented it to the federal government, and the federal government decided to buy into their concept and bought, paid for them in advance $150 million for COVID vaccine they would receive in the future. So paid in advance $150 million for that vaccine. Okay, then short time later, they also in, agreed to invest with promise for return for the money of another $173 million for investment for equipment, facility, etc., to accelerate the process for this Quebec-based company to then produce vaccine for COVID 19. Now, as it turns out, CBC at that time was talking on the news about the fact that this company had just gone out of business and there seemed to be no opportunity to cover any of the money. So, $323 million was given to this company to produce COVID 19 vaccine during the pandemic. I certainly understand that everybody was concerned and you know uptight and really pushing the vaccine availability, and rightfully so, fine. Uh, but our federal government decided to put that money, and then lo and behold, as this news report was stating, uh, there this company produced zero vaccine. They did not produce one single vial of viable COVID 19 vaccine. And and they went out of business and they have little or no asset to recover any of the $323 million. So how does that relate to housing? Well, I did a quick calculation, and based on what I know about housing, and in particular the tiny home community, I then calculated that at a cost of $100,000 per 400 square foot unit, um, plus installation, that I knew companies and uh, groups that would be able to produce 3,030 of these, these these units that could be used for community, uh, tiny homes, 400 square foot, the same units that are bigger actually than the units that were produced in Vancouver and in Toronto for transitional housing. The unit would have a full bathroom, shower, plus a kitchen, uh, a sink, dining room, combination living, living room and bedroom, like a studio apartment, or if they were made a little bit larger, it could even accommodate to make a separate bedroom and have a one bedroom suite, all for around $100,000 each. That doesn't include the land cost. And so that $322 million would produce over 3,030 of them. Plus, that allowed $20 million to produce the infrastructure equipment and the facility to actually build all of these units. So if you can imagine, in Peterborough, if you could have 3,030 individual units put down, laid down, provided for individual people, and it could all be done in less than 18 months. Now, imagine that compared to $323 million disappearing for absolutely nothing. The question on my mind was how can how can we have that little insight into the amount of time, like that amount of money? How can we spend, give away, provide that much money to a single company? And no one is following up until the bitter end that would all disappear. But yet, every dollar and every cent is so watched and carefully when it comes to providing affordable housing. It's so incredibly difficult, even under the the current federal government program for Rapid Housing Initiative, the RHI initiative. It is incredibly difficult for new companies, new modular companies, construction companies to break into that and be granted because one of the stipulations are so strong. Like you have to show projects and accomplishments and all sorts of paperwork in order to qualify to do any projects under that program. So the only people who ever get to do projects are the larger companies that have been doing the projects all along. So it doesn't allow for the development of new companies, specifically in the modular manufacturing world. So that is a problem and continues to be a problem, and really just don't know what to do about it. So I called CBC Radio, told them all about it. I left a message with my name, my phone number. I said, hey, look me up, gave me the spelling of my name, look me up, find me on LinkedIn. You'll see I'm for real and this is real. Please call me, I'll tell you all about it. Guess what? Never heard a single word, not one thing. Why is there no interest in this? Why would it be not for a phone to reach out to me? The previous day, I had been on the radio and I left a short message talking about my wife's ability to write, which was on for 30 seconds. So that somehow or another made the cut, but a way of providing housing for thousands of people isn't newsworthy. Wow, I'm disappointed. Anyway, that's it for Let's Talk Housing for this week. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and I hope that I get to hear from you. Please feel free to reach out. I can be reached on my cell phone and text or call me at 647-390-9036, or you can email me. My email is Stephen, Stephen, at Haylestrom, HAYLESTROM.com, Stephen at Haylestrom.com, just like my name. And my name's Stephen Haylestrom. And you can reach out to me. I'd love to have you on the show, interview, discuss housing and what we can do about it. There are solutions out there, just need to implement them. Got to stop talking and start doing. Thank you very much. Everybody, have a great week. Bye for now.